The first sign was the stillness, the eerie calm that replaced the gentle lapping of waves. Then, without warning, an explosion of force erupted from below, dragging everything into the depths. Teeth tore through flesh like knives, and the once peaceful ocean turned crimson. The predator moved with terrifying precision, its cold eyes betraying no mercy. The surface seemed miles away, unreachable and indifferent. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we start with today's shark attack story, I want to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel. Your subscription is very important to us, so please subscribe and leave a comment letting me know where in the world you are watching from. Click the like button, and let's get into the story. The faint glow of pre-dawn light seeped through the curtains of Mike Peterson's beachfront bungalow in Byron Bay. The rhythmic sound of waves crashing on the shore filtered through the open window, a constant lullaby that had become the backdrop to his life over the past 2 decades. At 40, Mike was as much a part of Byron Bay as the golden sands and the iconic lighthouse that watched over the town. His eyes fluttered open moments before his alarm was set to go off. A lifetime of early morning surf sessions had tuned his body clock with precision. Mike reached over and silenced the alarm before it could disturb the peace of the morning. He sat up, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair, feeling the familiar excitement build in his chest. It was surf day. Padding barefoot across the cool wooden floors, Mike made his way to the kitchen. He flicked on the coffee maker and grabbed his phone, opening the Surf Report app. A smile spread across his weathered face as he read the conditions. Perfect, he muttered to himself, taking a deep breath of the salty air wafting in from the ocean. The coffee maker gurgled its last and Mike poured himself a cup, savoring the rich aroma. He stepped out onto his small balcony, the wooden boards creaking slightly under his weight. The sky was a canvas of deep purples and blues, with a hint of orange just beginning to peek over the horizon. The ocean stretched out before him, a dark, shimmering expanse promising adventure. Mike sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the waves. They were clean and consistent, rolling in with a gentle power that made his heart race with anticipation. He could already imagine the feel of the water, the surge of adrenaline as he caught a wave, the moment of perfect balance as he rode it towards the shore. Finishing his coffee, Mike headed back inside to get ready. He slipped into his wetsuit with practiced ease, the neoprene a second skin after all these years. He ran his hand over the small rack of surfboards in the corner of his living room, finally selecting his trusted shortboard. It was an extension of himself in the water, responding to his every movement with fluid grace. As he was about to head out, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his daughter, Lily. "Good luck out there, Dad. Catch a big one for me. Love you." Mike smiled, typing back quickly. "Thanks, sweetie. I'll do my best. Love you too. Have a great day at school." With his board under his arm, Mike locked up and made his way down to the beach. The sand was cool beneath his feet, still untouched by the warmth of the sun. A few other early birds were already out, dark silhouettes against the brightening sky. As he approached the water's edge, he spotted his longtime surf buddy, Dave, waxing his board. "Morning, Mikey," Dave called out, his grin visible even in the dim light. "Thought you might sleep in and miss these beauties." Mike chuckled, setting his board down and beginning his own waxing routine. "Not a chance, mate. You know me better than that." Dave nodded, his eyes gleaming with the same excitement Mike felt. "Reckon it'll be a good one today. Water's clean. Swell's just right." "Aye," Mike agreed, finishing up with his board. "Shall we?" The two friends jogged into the surf, the shock of the cool water sending a jolt through Mike's system, fully awakening every nerve. They paddled out beyond the break, duck diving under the incoming waves with practiced efficiency. As they reached their usual spot, Mike sat up on his board, straddling it as he surveyed the scene around him. The sky was lightening by the minute, streaks of pink and gold painting the clouds. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the tang of salt and the promise of a new day. "God, I love this," Mike breathed, more to himself than to Dave. Dave, overhearing, nodded in agreement. "Never gets old, does it? 20 years we've been at this, and it still feels like the first time every morning." Mike grinned, feeling a surge of gratitude for his life, for this moment. Wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, bobbing gently with the swells, watching as the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon. The water around them turned from inky black to a deep, rich blue. "All right," Dave said, a note of challenge in his voice. "Let's see what you've got, old man. First one to catch a decent ride buys breakfast." Mike laughed, the competitive spark that had defined their friendship for years igniting once more. "You're on, youngster. Hope you brought your wallet." With that, they both began paddling, positioning themselves for the incoming set. Mike felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as he spotted his wave. Turning his board towards the shore, he paddled hard, feeling the water begin to lift him. In one fluid motion, he pushed himself up, his feet finding their positions on the board. Time seemed to slow as he dropped into the wave, the rush of water loud in his ears. He angled his board, riding along the face of the wave, feeling every shift and change in the water beneath him. For those precious moments, nothing else existed. Not his job, not his worries, not even the beach rushing towards him. It was just Mike, his board, and the ocean, moving in perfect harmony. As the wave began to lose power, Mike guided his board towards the shore, riding it out until he could jump off in the shallows. His heart was racing, a wide grin plastered across his face. He looked back out to sea, watching as Dave caught his own wave, carving a smooth line across its face. Mike waded back out, his board under his arm, ready for more. The sun was fully up now, casting a golden glow across the water. Other surfers were beginning to arrive, but the ocean felt vast and welcoming, with plenty of waves for everyone. For the next hour, Mike lost himself in the rhythm of the surf. Paddle out, wait, catch a wave, ride it in, repeat. Each ride was a unique experience, a conversation between himself and the ocean. Some waves were gentle, allowing for long, smooth rides. Others were more powerful, demanding quick reflexes and split-second decisions. As he sat on his board during a lull between sets, Mike took a moment to absorb the scene around him. The beach was coming to life. Early morning joggers and dog walkers dotting the sand. The calls of seagulls mingled with the crash of the waves and the distant hum of the town waking up. Dave paddled up beside him, water streaming from his hair. "Reckon it's about time to call it, mate. Some of us have to work for a living." Mike nodded, feeling the familiar pang of regret that always came with the end of a session. "Yeah, suppose you're right. One more?" Dave grinned. "You read my mind. Last one in buys coffee." They both turned their attention to the horizon, waiting for that perfect final wave. Mike spotted it first, a clean swell building in the distance. He began to paddle, his arms moving with practiced strength. As he positioned himself, a flicker of movement in the water caught his eye. For a split second, he thought he saw a large, dark shape moving beneath the surface. But then the wave was upon him, and all other thoughts were pushed aside as he focused on the ride. It was a good one, fast and powerful, and Mike rode it all the way in, the rush of adrenaline leaving him breathless and exhilarated. As he jumped off in the shallows, he looked back out to sea, searching for that dark shape he thought he'd seen. But the water was clear and blue, with no sign of anything unusual. Shaking his head, Mike chalked it up to a trick of the light or an overactive imagination. He trudged up the beach, his board under his arm, tired but deeply satisfied. It had been a perfect morning session, the kind that would fuel him through the rest of his day. As he reached his towel, Dave jogged up beside him, slightly out of breath. "Looks like coffee's on me," he panted. "That last wave of yours was a beauty." Mike grinned, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "Thanks, mate. It was a good one." As they packed up their gear and headed towards their favorite beachside cafe, Mike took one last look at the ocean. The water sparkled in the morning sunlight, calm and inviting. He felt a deep sense of peace, completely unaware that in just 24 hours, those same waters would become the stage for a life-altering encounter that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the ocean he loved. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the golden sands of Byron Bay, the crystal-clear waters of the Pacific Ocean concealed a formidable presence. Beneath the surface, a massive bull shark glided through the depths, its powerful body propelled by smooth, efficient strokes of its tail. The shark, a female nearly 3.5 meters in length, had been drawn to the area by the abundance of bait fish that had gathered in the bay. Her keen senses were on high alert, detecting the slightest vibrations and chemical signals in the water around her. She was hungry, driven by an instinct as old as time itself, the need to feed. The predator's rough gray skin glistened as shafts of sunlight penetrated the water, highlighting the scars that told the story of a life spent in the unforgiving realm of the open ocean. Her black, expressionless eyes scanned the underwater landscape, missing nothing as she patrolled her newfound hunting grounds. As the bull shark moved closer to shore, the ecosystem around her responded. A school of yellowtail kingfish, sensing the apex predator's presence, suddenly changed direction, their silver bodies flashing as they moved in perfect unison. A pair of dolphins, usually playful and curious, abruptly altered their course, their clicks and whistles taking on a more urgent tone as they communicated the potential danger to one another. On the ocean floor, a loggerhead turtle quickly retreated into a rocky crevice, its ancient instincts recognizing the threat that now patrolled above. Even the smaller reef sharks, usually bold in their own right, gave the bull shark a wide berth, respecting the unspoken hierarchy of the sea. The shark continued her relentless patrol, moving into shallower waters. Her powerful sense of smell detected the lingering scent of blood from a fish that had been caught and cleaned by local fishermen earlier that morning. The trace was faint, but it was enough to pique her interest and draw her closer to the shore. As she approached the surfing zone, her dorsal fin occasionally broke the surface, creating a fleeting shadow that would have sent chills down the spine of any observant beachgoer. But in the early morning light, with the sun's glare on the water, these brief appearances went unnoticed by the handful of people on the beach. On the shore, lifeguard Sarah Thompson was just beginning her shift. She climbed up to her tower, binoculars in hand, ready for another day of watching over the beachgoers of Byron Bay. As she settled into her chair, she scanned the water, her trained eyes searching for any signs of trouble. "Morning, Sarah," called out her colleague Tim from the base of the tower. "Anything exciting out there?" Sarah lowered her binoculars and smiled down at Tim. "All quiet so far. Few early birds catching some waves, but that's about it." Tim nodded, his eyes squinting against the morning sun as he looked out over the water. "Heard some of the local fishermen talking about increased activity offshore. Might want to keep an extra eye out today." Sarah's brow furrowed slightly. "What kind of activity?" Tim shrugged. "Not sure exactly. Just mumblings about bigger predators moving in closer than usual. Probably nothing, but you know how it is. Better safe than sorry." Sarah nodded, her expression turning serious. "Thanks for the heads up. I'll keep a sharp lookout." As Tim walked away to begin his beach patrol, Sarah turned her attention back to the water, her eyes now searching with renewed focus. She knew that bull sharks were not uncommon in these waters, especially during this time of year, but direct encounters were rare. Still, the possibility always loomed, an ever-present risk in their slice of ocean paradise. Out in the water, oblivious to the danger lurking beneath, a group of surfers waited for the perfect wave. Among them was Mike Peterson, the local surfer who had been out since dawn. He sat straddling his board, chatting with a younger surfer named Jake. "So you've been surfing these waters for what, 30 years now?" Jake asked, clearly in awe of Mike's experience. Mike chuckled, running a hand through his salt-encrusted hair. "Something like that. Started when I was just a grommet, probably not much older than you are now." Jake's eyes widened. "Man, you must have seen it all out here. Ever had any close calls? You know, with the, bigger fish?" Mike knew exactly what Jake was asking about. Every surfer had that thought in the back of their mind, the primal fear of what might be swimming beneath them. He'd had his share of scares over the years, but nothing too serious. "Had a few encounters over the years," Mike admitted, his eyes scanning the horizon for the next set of waves. "Saw a great white once way out past the break. Majestic creature, but I won't lie. Scared the hell out of me. Paddled in faster than I've ever moved in my life." Jake gulped audibly, his eyes now darting nervously to the water around them. "How do you deal with it?" "The fear, I mean." Mike was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "You respect the ocean, Jake. You remember that we're visitors here, in their world. But you can't let fear control you." The joy of riding these waves, of being one with the ocean, it's worth the risk. As they spoke, neither of them noticed the dark shape that passed by in the deeper water behind them, the bull shark continuing her patrol of the area. Closer to shore, a marine biologist named Dr. Emma Chen was conducting her regular survey of the local marine life. She stood knee-deep in the shallows, clipboard in hand, making notes on the small fish and crustaceans that inhabited the shoreline ecosystem. A movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. She looked up, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the water further out. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a large fin break the surface, but it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. "Hey, Emma!" a voice called from the beach. It was her research assistant, Alex, jogging towards her with a piece of equipment in hand. Emma waved him over, her eyes still fixed on the spot where she'd seen the disturbance. "Alex, did you see that?" Alex followed her gaze, looking confused. "See what?" Emma hesitated, second-guessing herself. "I thought I saw—" Never mind. It was probably nothing. But as Alex waded out to join her, Emma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her stomach. She'd spent years studying the marine life in these waters, and her instincts were rarely wrong. "Let's finish up here and head back to the lab," she said to Alex, her voice carrying a hint of urgency. "I want to check the recent data from our acoustic receivers." As they worked, Emma kept glancing out to sea, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. If there was a large predator in the bay, they needed to know about it. Not just for the safety of the beachgoers, but for the balance of the entire ecosystem. Meanwhile, the bull shark continued her relentless patrol, drawn ever closer to the surfing zone by the vibrations of the surfers paddling and the splashing of their boards. Her primitive brain registered these disturbances as potential prey, triggering her hunting instincts. As she circled closer, her dorsal fin broke the surface once more, this time remaining visible for a few seconds longer. A young boy building a sandcastle on the beach pointed excitedly, tugging at his mother's sleeve. "Mommy, Mommy, I saw a shark!" he exclaimed, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. His mother, engrossed in her book, barely looked up. "That's nice, honey. I'm sure it was just a dolphin." But the boy was insistent. "No, Mommy, it was a shark. A big one." The mother sighed, finally putting down her book and scanning the water. But the surface was calm now, showing no signs of the predator that lurked beneath. "I don't see anything, sweetie. Why don't you go back to building your castle?" Disappointed but not deterred, the boy returned to his sandcastle, occasionally glancing up at the water, hoping for another glimpse of the mysterious creature he'd seen. Out beyond the break, Mike was paddling back toward shore, deciding it was time to catch one last wave before heading in. As he moved through the water, he felt a sudden shift in the energy around him. The ocean, which had felt so welcoming all morning, now seemed to hold a hint of menace. He paused, sitting up on his board and looking around. The other surfers seemed oblivious, laughing and chatting as they waited for waves, but Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Just then, a large fish jumped clear out of the water about 50 meters away, seeming to flee from something. Mike's heart rate quickened, his years of experience sending warning signals through his body. "Hey guys," he called out to the nearest group of surfers. "I think we might want to think about heading in." Jake, the young surfer he'd been talking to earlier, paddled over. "What's up, Mike? You see something?" Mike shook his head, still scanning the water. "Not exactly. Just got a feeling. That's all." Jake looked skeptical. "A feeling? Come on, man, the waves are just getting good." Mike was about to insist when a perfect swell began to form behind them. The call of one last ride was too strong to resist, even with his unease. "All right," he said, turning his board toward shore. "But this is the last one. For real this time." As Mike began to paddle, matching the speed of the approaching wave, he was unaware of the massive shape that had turned towards him, attracted by his movements. The bull shark, driven by instinct and hunger, began to rise from the depths, its powerful tail propelling it upwards with frightening speed. Mike felt the wave lift him, the familiar surge of adrenaline pushing aside his earlier concerns. He pushed himself up, his feet finding their places on the board as he dropped into the wave. For a moment, everything else faded away. The uneasy feeling, the concerns about what might be in the water. It was just Mike and the ocean, moving as one. But as he rode the wave towards shore, the bull shark continued its silent approach from below, unseen and unsuspected. The stage was set for an encounter that would forever change the lives of everyone on Byron Bay Beach that morning, and test the limits of human courage in the face of nature's most perfect predator. Mike Peterson rode the wave with the practiced ease of a lifelong surfer, his body moving in perfect harmony with the board beneath his feet. The early morning sun glinted off the water, creating a dazzling display of light and motion. For a brief, exhilarating moment, all was right in Mike's world. But beneath the surface, unseen and undetected, a primal drama was unfolding. The bull shark, driven by instinct and hunger, surged upward through the water column. Its powerful tail propelled its streamlined body with astonishing speed, closing the distance to Mike with each passing second. The shark's black, lifeless eyes were fixed on the silhouette above, its sensitive receptors picking up on the vibrations of Mike's movements. As Mike angled his board to ride out the last of the wave, he felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. Years of surfing had honed his instincts, and something felt off. He glanced quickly over his shoulder, scanning the water behind him, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Shaking off the feeling, Mike focused on guiding his board towards the shore. "Just nerves," he muttered to himself. "Getting jumpy in your old age, Mikey." In that split second of distraction, the bull shark made its move. The massive predator burst from the water directly beneath Mike's board, its powerful jaws wide open. Time seemed to slow down as Mike registered a flash of gray and a row of razor-sharp teeth. Then, chaos erupted. The shark's jaws clamped down on Mike's left leg with bone-crushing force. The initial strike was so powerful that it lifted Mike clean off his board, sending him crashing into the water. "Argh!" Mike's scream of agony and shock pierced the air, cutting through the peaceful morning atmosphere like a knife. Underwater, Mike's world became a confused blur of pain and bubbles. The shark thrashed violently, its serrated teeth tearing through flesh and muscle. Mike's survival instincts kicked in, overriding the paralyzing shock of the attack. With desperate strength, he pounded his fists against the shark's snout, aiming for the sensitive areas around its eyes and gills. The water around them churned red with blood. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only seconds, the shark loosened its grip, momentarily stunned by Mike's counterattack. Seizing the opportunity, Mike kicked hard with his uninjured leg and broke the surface, gasping for air. "Help!" he screamed. His voice raw with terror and pain. "Shark, help me!" On the beach, lifeguard Sarah Thompson had been scanning the water through her binoculars when she saw the attack unfold. Her training kicked in immediately. "Shark attack in progress," she shouted into her radio, already sprinting towards the water's edge. "Surfer down about 100 meters out from Tower 3. Launch the jet ski now." Sarah's voice, amplified by the lifeguard tower's speakers, carried across the beach. "Everyone out of the water. Shark attack in progress. Clear the beach immediately." Panic erupted on the shore as beachgoers scrambled to safety. Parents scooped up children, sunbathers abandoned their towels, and other surfers who had been catching waves nearby began paddling frantically towards the beach. Out in the water, Mike was fighting for his life. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a searing pain in his left leg. He could feel the warm rush of blood pulsing from the wound with each frantic heartbeat. "Stay calm, stay calm," he repeated to himself, trying to keep his head above water. He knew that panicking would only make things worse. Nearby, Jake, the young surfer Mike had been chatting with earlier, had heard Mike's screams and was paddling towards him. "Mike, hold on, I'm coming!" Jake shouted, his face pale with fear but determined to help. Mike saw Jake approaching and felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by terror. "No, stay back," he yelled. "The shark's still here." As if summoned by Mike's words, the bull shark's dorsal fin broke the surface, circling ominously. The predator, having tasted blood, was preparing for another attack. Jake froze, his board bobbing in the water just meters from Mike. "Oh God," he whispered, his eyes wide with horror. Mike knew he had to act fast. With every ounce of strength he could muster, he began to swim towards Jake, using his arms to pull himself through the water. His injured leg trailed behind him, leaving a crimson trail in his wake. "Jake," Mike gasped, his voice strained. "Help me onto your board, quickly." Snapping out of his shock, Jake maneuvered his board closer to Mike. With Jake's help, Mike managed to haul himself partially onto the surfboard, his lower body still dangling in the water. "We've got to get to shore," Mike panted, his face ashen from pain and blood loss. "But slowly. No splashing. Don't want to attract it more than we already have." Jake nodded, too terrified to speak. He began to paddle cautiously, trying to propel them towards the safety of the beach without making too much disturbance in the water. But the shark wasn't done. Attracted by the scent of blood and the vibrations of their movement, it began to close in once more. "It's coming back," Jake cried, spotting the fin cutting through the water towards them. Mike twisted around, ignoring the searing pain in his leg, to face the approaching predator. He knew their chances of both making it to shore were slim if the shark attacked again. In that moment, Mike made a decision that would haunt him for years to come. "Jake," he said, his voice eerily calm, "when I tell you to, paddle as hard and fast as you can towards the shore. Don't look back. Don't stop, just go." Jake's eyes widened in realization. "No, Mike, I can't leave you." "You have to," Mike insisted. "It's the only way. Get help. Tell them where I am." Before Jake could protest further, the shark surged forward, its massive body preparing to strike. "Now!" Mike yelled, pushing himself off Jake's board and into the water. Jake, driven by instinct and Mike's command, began to paddle furiously towards the shore. Tears streamed down his face as he heard the splash and a muffled cry behind him. Mike found himself once again face to face with the bull shark. This time, he was ready. As the shark charged, Mike summoned every bit of knowledge he had about shark behavior. He remembered reading that sharks often respond to direct confrontation by retreating. Taking a deep breath, Mike lunged towards the shark, his hands outstretched towards its sensitive snout. The move caught the predator off guard, and it veered away at the last second, its rough skin grazing Mike's palms. The maneuver bought Mike a few precious seconds. He used them to take in his surroundings, trying to formulate a plan. He spotted his own surfboard floating nearby and began to swim towards it, his movements sluggish from exhaustion and blood loss. Just as his fingers grasped the edge of the board, he heard the roar of an approaching engine. The lifeguard's jet ski was racing towards him, Sarah at the controls with another lifeguard, Tom, riding on the back. "Hold on, Mike," Sarah shouted over the engine's roar. "We're coming." Mike had never been so relieved to hear anything in his life. But his relief was short-lived as he felt a disturbance in the water behind him. The shark, momentarily scared off by the jet ski's approach, was circling back. Sarah maneuvered the jet ski alongside Mike. Tom reached down, grabbing Mike's arms to pull him aboard. But as they began to lift him, the shark made its final, devastating attack. With lightning speed, the bull shark clamped its jaws around Mike's already injured leg. The force of the bite nearly pulled Mike from Tom's grasp. Mike's scream of agony was blood-curdling. Sarah revved the jet ski's engine, the noise and vibrations finally causing the shark to release its hold and retreat into the depths. With a Herculean effort, Tom hauled Mike onto the jet ski. Mike collapsed against him, barely conscious, his leg a mangled mess of flesh and bone. "Go, go, go!" Tom yelled to Sarah, one arm holding Mike secure while the other pressed against the worst of the wounds, trying to stem the blood flow. Sarah gunned the engine, speeding towards the shore where paramedics were already waiting. As they raced across the waves, Sarah radioed ahead. "Severe trauma to the left leg, massive blood loss. Have blood transfusions ready." On the beach, a crowd had gathered, held back by a hastily erected police cordon. Murmurs of shock and prayers rippled through the onlookers as the jet ski approached, carrying its grievously injured passenger. As they reached the shallows, paramedics rushed into the water. With practiced efficiency, they transferred Mike onto a backboard and carried him up the beach to the waiting ambulance. Dr. Emma Chen, the marine biologist who had been conducting research earlier, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and professional interest. She knew that understanding this attack would be crucial for preventing future incidents. As the ambulance doors slammed shut and the vehicle sped away, its sirens wailing, a hush fell over the beach. The idyllic morning had turned into a nightmare, a stark reminder of the wild and unpredictable nature of the ocean they all loved. Out in the bay, unnoticed by the humans on shore, the bull shark slipped back into deeper waters. Its primitive brain registered only that it had encountered something unfamiliar and potentially threatening. With no concept of the trauma it had inflicted, the predator continued its endless patrol of the coastal waters, driven by the timeless instincts of hunger and survival. For Mike Peterson, and for the community of Byron Bay, life would never be quite the same again. The long journey of recovery, both physical and psychological, was just beginning. The wail of sirens pierced the air as the ambulance carrying Mike Peterson sped through the streets of Byron Bay. Inside, paramedics worked feverishly to stabilize their patient, their faces etched with concentration and urgency. BP's dropping, 90/60. One paramedic called out, her voice tight with tension. "We need to get this bleeding under control." Mike drifted in and out of consciousness, the world around him a blur of pain and disjointed sensations. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth, and the sharp smell of antiseptic stung his nostrils. Through the haze, he could hear snatches of conversation, the urgency in the paramedics' voices sending jolts of fear through his system. "Stay with us, Mike," a voice urged, seeming to come from far away. "We're almost there. Just hold on." In his semi-conscious state, Mike's mind replayed the attack in vivid, terrifying detail. The initial strike, the searing pain, the primal fear as he fought against the relentless predator. He tried to speak, to ask about Jake and the other surfers, but no words came out. At Byron Bay Hospital, the emergency room was a flurry of activity. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead trauma surgeon on duty, had been briefed on Mike's condition and was preparing for his arrival. "All right, team," she addressed the assembled staff, her voice calm but authoritative. "We've got a severe shark attack victim coming in. Multiple lacerations to the left leg, significant blood loss. We need to be ready for immediate transfusion and possible amputation. Let's move." As if on cue, the emergency room doors burst open, and Mike was wheeled in on a gurney. The paramedics rattled off his vitals and the treatment they'd administered en route. Dr. Chen immediately took charge. "Get him into Trauma 1. I want a full blood panel, type and cross-match. Start pushing O negative until we get his type. And someone page ortho and vascular. Now." The trauma room erupted into controlled chaos as nurses and doctors swarmed around Mike. His wetsuit was cut away, revealing the full extent of his injuries. The sight was enough to make even seasoned medical professionals pause. Mike's left leg was a mangled mess of torn flesh and exposed bone. The bull shark's powerful jaws had done catastrophic damage, shredding muscle and severing blood vessels. But it was the right leg that now caught Dr. Chen's attention. "We've got puncture wounds on the right calf," she called out. "Looks like a secondary bite. Let's get that cleaned and dressed. Priority is still the left leg." As the medical team worked to save Mike's leg and his life, out in the waiting room, the first of Mike's family and friends began to arrive. His wife, Lisa, burst through the doors, her face pale with shock and fear. "My husband," she gasped to the receptionist, her voice trembling. "Mike Peterson. He was attacked by a shark." "Where is he? Is he okay?" The receptionist, trained to handle distraught family members, spoke in a calm, reassuring tone. "Mrs. Peterson, your husband is in surgery right now. The doctors are doing everything they can. Someone will come out to update you as soon as possible." Lisa collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with silent sobs. She was soon joined by Dave, Mike's longtime surfing buddy who had heard the news and rushed to the hospital. "Lisa," Dave said softly, sitting next to her and placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "How is he?" Lisa looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "I don't know. Dave, they won't tell me anything." "Oh God, what if he—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too terrible to voice. Dave squeezed her shoulder gently. "Hey now. Mike's the toughest son of a gun I know. If anyone can pull through this, it's him." As they sat in tense silence waiting for news, the hospital corridors buzzed with activity. News of the shark attack had spread quickly, and local media were already gathering outside, hungry for updates. Back in the operating room, Dr. Chen and her team were fighting against time to save Mike's leg. The damage was extensive, but there was hope. "We've got circulation to the foot. Dr. Chen announced, a note of cautious optimism in her voice. "It's weak, but it's there. Let's focus on repairing these arteries. We might just save this leg yet." Hour after hour passed as the surgeons worked tirelessly. They reattached severed blood vessels, stitched together torn muscle, and stabilized shattered bones. It was painstaking, delicate work, but slowly, progress was made. In the waiting room, Lisa and Dave were joined by more of Mike's friends and family. Jake, the young surfer who had helped Mike during the attack, arrived, still in his wetsuit and visibly shaken. "Mrs. Peterson," he said hesitantly, approaching Lisa. "I'm Jake. I was there when it happened. I tried to help Mike." Lisa looked up at the young man, seeing the guilt and fear in his eyes. Without a word, she stood and pulled him into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being there for him." Jake broke down then, the emotions of the day finally overwhelming him. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I should have done more. I should have." "You did everything you could," Lisa assured him, her own voice choked with emotion. Mike would be so grateful. As the group waited, they shared stories about Mike. His love for the ocean, his kindness, his terrible jokes. It was a way to keep hope alive, to remind themselves of the man they were all praying would pull through. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Dr. Chen emerged from the operating room. She looked exhausted, but determined as she approached Mike's family. "Mrs. Peterson?" she asked, and Lisa stood immediately, gripping Dave's hand for support. "Your husband's condition is stable," Dr. Chen began, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the group. "We've managed to save his left leg, though there's still a long road of recovery ahead. The damage was extensive, but Mike is strong. He's fighting hard." Lisa's knees buckled and Dave caught her, supporting her weight. "He's alive," she whispered. "Oh, thank God." Dr. Chen continued, her voice gentle but honest. "The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical. We'll be monitoring him closely for any signs of infection or complications. But I want you to know your husband showed remarkable resilience. His physical fitness and quick thinking during the attack likely saved his life." As Dr. Chen explained the extent of Mike's injuries and the long recovery process ahead, Lisa listened with growing determination. "When can I see him?" she asked. "He's being moved to the ICU now," Dr. Chen replied. "Once he's settled, you can go in for a short visit, but remember, he's heavily sedated and will be for some time." As the group absorbed this news, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the windows, they could see news vans and reporters gathering, all clamoring for information about the shark attack victim. Dave turned to Lisa, his expression serious. "You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. We can handle this." Lisa squared her shoulders, a steely resolve settling over her features. "No, I'll do it. They need to know that Mike's a fighter, that he's going to get through this. And they need to understand that this wasn't just some random attack. We need better shark monitoring, better warning systems. If any good can come from this, it has to start now." As Lisa prepared to face the media, inside the ICU, Mike Peterson lay still, his body battered but alive. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring his vital signs. His left leg, heavily bandaged and elevated, bore testament to the ordeal he had endured and the fight that still lay ahead. In his sedated state, Mike was oblivious to the tubes and wires surrounding him, unaware of the battle his body had just fought and won. But deep in his subconscious, the memory of those terrifying moments in the water remained, a primal fear that would shape his life in ways he had yet to understand. As night fell over Byron Bay, the community rallied around the Peterson family. Candlelight vigils were held on the beach. Surfers paddled out in a circle of solidarity, and messages of support flooded in from around the world. The ocean, now calm and innocuous under the moonlight, gave no hint of the drama that had unfolded in its depths. But for those who lived and loved by its shores, the events of that day had forever changed their relationship with the sea. Mike Peterson had survived the initial attack, but his fight was far from over. The journey to recovery, both physical and psychological, was just beginning, a journey that would test his strength, his relationships, and his very identity as a surfer and lover of the ocean. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting a deceptive calm over Byron Bay. But beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, chaos reigned. Mike Peterson's agonized screams still echoed across the water, sending shock waves of panic through the scattered group of surfers. Tom Fletcher, a seasoned lifeguard with over a decade of experience, had been scanning the horizon from his tower when he heard Mike's first cry. His trained eyes immediately zeroed in on the commotion, and his heart sank as he registered the telltale signs of a shark attack. "Shark attack in progress," Tom barked into his radio, already sprinting down the tower steps. "Surfer down, about 100 meters out from Tower 3. I'm going in." As Tom raced towards the water's edge, his colleague Sarah Thompson was already mobilizing the jet ski rescue team. Her voice, amplified by the lifeguard tower's speakers, cut through the morning air. "Everyone out of the water. Shark attack in progress. Clear the beach immediately." Tom didn't hesitate as he hit the water, his powerful strokes propelling him towards Mike. Years of training kicked in, pushing aside the fear that threatened to paralyze him. He knew the risks. The shark could still be in the area, possibly drawn back by the blood in the water. But Tom also knew that every second counted. As he swam, he could see two surfers already making their way towards Mike. He recognized one of them as Jake, a young local who was a regular at the beach. "Jake!" Tom shouted as he got closer. "Get yourself and your buddy to shore now. We've got this." Jake, his face pale with shock, nodded numbly. "But Mike, he's hurt bad, Tom. The shark, it might come back." Tom reached them, treading water as he assessed the situation. Mike was barely conscious, clinging weakly to Jake's surfboard. The water around them was tinged red with blood. "I know, Jake," Tom said, his voice firm but reassuring. "But the best thing you can do for Mike right now is to get yourself safe. Sarah's bringing the jet ski. We'll get him out." Jake hesitated for a moment, torn between his desire to help and the paralyzing fear that gripped him. Finally, with a shaky nod, he started paddling toward shore, towing his shell-shocked friend with him. Tom turned his attention to Mike, grasping the edge of the surfboard to keep it steady. "Mike, can you hear me? It's Tom. Help's on the way, mate. Just hang on." Mike's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with pain. "Tom?" he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "The shark, it's still out there." As if summoned by Mike's words, a dark shape glided beneath the surface nearby. Tom's breath caught in his throat as he saw the unmistakable outline of a large shark circling back towards them. "Sarah, we need that jet ski now," Tom shouted into his radio, his voice tight with urgency. "The shark's circling back." Sarah's voice crackled over the radio, tense but professional. "On our way, Tom. ETA 60 seconds. Keep him afloat." Those 60 seconds felt like an eternity. Tom kept one arm looped through Mike's, ready to pull him clear if the shark attacked again. With his free hand, he unclipped the rescue buoy from his belt, prepared to use it as a makeshift weapon if necessary. "Stay with me, Mike," Tom urged, noticing Mike's eyes starting to close again. "Tell me about your family. You've got a daughter, right? What's her name?" Mike stirred slightly, a faint smile touching his lips despite the pain. "Lily," he whispered. She's 12. Has her first surf competition next month." Tom nodded encouragingly, keeping one eye on the circling shape beneath them. "That's right, Lily. You've got to stay strong for her, Mike. She needs her dad to cheer her on at that competition." The whine of the jet ski's engine cut through the air, growing louder as Sarah and another lifeguard, Ryan, approached. Tom had never been so relieved to hear that sound. "Okay, Mike," Tom said, his voice raised to be heard over the approaching engine. "We're going to get you onto that ski. It's going to hurt, but we need to move fast. You ready?" Mike managed a weak nod, gritting his teeth in anticipation of the pain to come. As Sarah maneuvered the jet ski alongside them, Ryan leaned out, reaching for Mike. "On 3, he called to Tom. 1, 2, 3. They lifted Mike clear of the water, eliciting a gut-wrenching cry of pain from the injured surfer. For a heart-stopping moment, Mike's blood-slicked body almost slipped from their grasp. But with a final heave, they managed to secure him on the rescue sled attached to the back of the jet ski. "Go, go, go!" Tom shouted, scrambling onto the sled beside Mike to keep him stable. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She opened the throttle, and the jet ski surged forward, speeding towards the shore where paramedics were already waiting. As they raced across the waves, Tom worked to assess Mike's injuries. The left leg was a mangled mess, with multiple deep lacerations that were still bleeding heavily. Tom pressed a compression bandage against the worst of the wounds, trying to stem the blood flow. "How bad is it?" Mike gasped, his face ashen with shock and blood loss. Tom met Mike's eyes, knowing that false reassurance would do no good. "It's bad, mate," he said honestly. "But you're tough. We're going to get you to the hospital and they'll fix you up. Just keep fighting." Mike nodded weakly. Then his eyes rolled back and he lost consciousness. Tom's heart raced as he checked Mike's pulse, thready and weak, but still there. "Sarah, we're losing him," Tom called out. "Push it faster if you can." Sarah nudged the throttle forward, pushing the jet ski to its limits. The shore seemed agonizingly far away, but with each passing second it grew closer. On the beach, a crowd had gathered, held back by a hastily erected police cordon. Murmurs of shock and prayers rippled through the onlookers as the jet ski approached, carrying its grievously injured passenger. As they hit the shallows, a team of paramedics rushed into the water. With practiced efficiency, they transferred Mike onto a backboard and carried him up the beach to the waiting ambulance. Tom stumbled off the rescue sled, his legs shaky from adrenaline and exertion. He watched as the paramedics swarmed around Mike, attaching IV lines and monitoring equipment. "BP's critically low," one paramedic called out. "We need to move now." As the ambulance doors slammed shut and the vehicle sped away, its sirens wailing, a hush fell over the beach. The idyllic morning had turned into a nightmare, a stark reminder of the wild and unpredictable nature of the ocean they all loved. Sarah approached Tom, her face etched with concern. "You okay?" she asked softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Tom nodded, still staring after the departed ambulance. "Yeah," he said, his voice hoarse. "But that was close. Too close." "You did good out there, Tom," Sarah assured him. "If you hadn't reached him so quickly." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew that without the rapid response, Mike's chances of survival would have been slim to none. As the shock of the event began to settle, the beach burst into activity once more. Police were taking statements from witnesses, news crews were arriving to cover the story, and curious onlookers were being ushered away from the scene. Dr. Emma Chen, the marine biologist who had been conducting research earlier that morning, approached the lifeguard team. Her face was grave as she spoke to Tom and Sarah. "I saw the whole thing from shore," she said. "The shark, it was a bull shark, wasn't it?" Tom nodded, running a hand through his salt-encrusted hair. "Yeah, looked like it. Big one too, maybe 3 meters. Emma's brow furrowed in concern. "That's unusual for this time of year. We need to understand why it came so close to shore. This attack, it could have implications for the whole ecosystem." As they discussed the incident, Jake approached, still looking shaken. Is he going to be okay?" he asked hesitantly. Tom turned to the young surfer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "He's in good hands now, Jake. The doctors will do everything they can." Jake nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I should have done more. I could have." "You did everything right," Sarah interjected firmly. "You kept him afloat, called for help. You're a hero, Jake." As the group stood there, the weight of the morning's events settling over them, they all knew that life in Byron Bay would never be quite the same. The ocean, which had always been their playground and livelihood, now held a new element of danger, a reminder of nature's awesome and sometimes terrible power. Tom looked out over the waves, now deceptively calm and inviting. He knew that in the days to come, there would be debates about shark culls, protective nets, and the balance between human safety and marine conservation. But for now, all he could think about was Mike, fighting for his life in the back of that ambulance, and the long road to recovery that lay ahead. For Mike, for the community, and for their relationship with the sea. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the scene of the rescue, Byron Bay began the process of coming to terms with the tragedy that had unfolded in its waters. The day's events would leave an indelible mark on the community, a reminder of both the perils and the indomitable spirit of those who lived their lives by the sea. The wail of sirens pierced the air as the ambulance carrying Mike Peterson sped through the streets of Byron Bay. Inside the vehicle, a frantic battle was being waged against time and the devastating injuries inflicted by the bull shark. Paramedic Jessica Chen worked with practiced efficiency, her hands moving swiftly as she tried to stabilize Mike's condition. The interior of the ambulance was a flurry of activity, the confined space filled with the beeping of monitors and the urgent voices of the medical team. "BP's dropping 80/50, Jessica called out, her voice tense but controlled. "We need to get more fluids in him stat." Her partner Sam was already hanging another bag of saline, his movements quick and precise. "How's his leg looking?" he asked, glancing at the mangled limb. Jessica's face was grim as she assessed the damage. "Fit's bad. Multiple deep lacerations, possible arterial damage. We need to get him to the hospital ASAP before he bleeds out." As they worked, Mike drifted in and out of consciousness, the world around him a blur of pain and disjointed sensations. Through the haze, he could hear snatches of conversation, the urgency in the paramedics' voices sending jolts of fear through his system. "Lisa," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the noise of the ambulance. "My wife. Need to tell her." Jessica leaned in close, trying to hear him better. "Don't worry, Mr. Peterson, we've already notified your family. They'll meet us at the hospital. You just focus on staying with us, okay?" Mike's eyes fluttered, struggling to stay open. The pain in his leg was excruciating, but it was starting to feel distant, detached. A part of him knew this wasn't a good sign. "The competition," he muttered, his thoughts jumbled. "Lily's competition, I can't miss it." Sam and Jessica exchanged worried glances. They both knew the signs of someone slipping into shock. "Keep talking to him," Sam urged. "We need to keep him conscious if we can." Jessica nodded, turning back to Mike. "That's right, Mr. Peterson, Lily's competition. When is it? Tell me about it." Mike's face softened slightly at the mention of his daughter. Next month," he managed. "Her first big event. She's been practicing so hard." As Mike spoke, Jessica continued to work, applying pressure to the worst of the wounds while monitoring his vitals. The ambulance swerved, taking a corner at high speed, and she had to brace herself to keep from losing her balance. "ETA 3 minutes, the driver called back. "Hear that, Mr. Peterson?" Jessica said, trying to keep Mike engaged. "We're almost there. Just hang on a little longer." But Mike's eyes were starting to glaze over, his responses becoming more sluggish. The monitor tracking his heart rate began to emit a shrill alarm. "He's crashing," Sam shouted, immediately moving to start chest compressions. "Jessica, get the defibrillator ready." The next few moments were a blur of activity. Sam pumped Mike's chest rhythmically while Jessica prepared the defibrillator. The ambulance screeched to a halt outside the emergency room just as they delivered the first shock. "Come on, Mike," Jessica muttered, watching the monitor intently. "Don't give up now. Your family's waiting for you." After what felt like an eternity, but was in reality only seconds, a faint blip appeared on the screen. Mike's heart had restarted, but his condition was still critical. The back doors of the ambulance burst open, revealing a team of ER doctors and nurses ready to take over. Jessica rattled off Mike's condition and the treatment they'd administered as they wheeled the gurney rapidly towards the trauma center. Shark attack victim, mid-40s male. Multiple deep lacerations to the left leg. Possible arterial damage. BP's critically low, lost consciousness en route. We had to resuscitate once. He's received 2 units of ONEG and 2 liters of saline. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead trauma surgeon on duty, took charge immediately. "Get him into Trauma 1, she ordered. "I want a full blood panel, type and cross-match. Start pushing more O negative until we get his type. And someone page ortho and vascular, now." As Mike was wheeled away, Jessica and Sam stood for a moment in the ambulance bay, the adrenaline of the last half hour starting to wear off. "That was close," Sam said quietly, running a hand through his hair. "Too close." Jessica nodded, her face pale. "Yeah. God, I hope he makes it." Inside the hospital, the trauma room erupted into controlled chaos as nurses and doctors swarmed around Mike. His wetsuit was cut away, revealing the full extent of his injuries. The sight was enough to make even seasoned medical professionals pause. Dr. Chen's voice cut through the noise, calm and authoritative. "All right, people, let's move. We need to stop this bleeding and assess the damage. Ortho, what's your take on the leg?" Dr. Mark Simmons, the orthopedic surgeon, was already examining the mangled limb. "It's bad, but I think we can save it. The shark missed the major arteries by millimeters. He's lucky in a way." "Lucky isn't the word I'd use," Dr. Chen replied grimly. "But I'll take it. Let's get him prepped for surgery. We need to debride these wounds and repair as much of the damage as we can." As the medical team worked to stabilize Mike for surgery, out in the waiting room, the first of his family and friends began to arrive. Lisa Peterson burst through the doors, her face pale with shock and fear. She was accompanied by Dave, Mike's longtime surfing buddy, who had his arm around her shoulders in support. "My husband," Lisa gasped to the receptionist, her voice trembling. "Mike Peterson. He was attacked by a shark. Where is he? Is he okay?" The receptionist, trained to handle distraught family members, spoke in a calm, reassuring tone. "Mrs. Peterson, your husband is being treated in the trauma center right now. The doctors are doing everything they can. Someone will come out to update you as soon as possible." Lisa nodded numbly, allowing Dave to guide her to a seat in the waiting area. As they sat down, Lisa turned to Dave, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. "Dave, what if he doesn't—" She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. Dave squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Hey now, this is Mike we're talking about, the toughest, most stubborn guy I know. If anyone can pull through this, it's him." Lisa managed a weak smile, grateful for Dave's presence. "You're right. He's a fighter. He has to be okay. He has to be." As they waited, more of Mike's friends began to arrive. The waiting room slowly filled with surfers still in their wetsuits and locals who had heard the news and rushed to offer support. The community of Byron Bay was rallying around one of their own. Jake, the young surfer who had helped Mike during the attack, arrived looking shell-shocked. He approached Lisa hesitantly, guilt written all over his face. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Jake. I was there when it happened. I tried to help Mike. I'm so sorry I couldn't do more." Lisa stood and without a word pulled Jake into a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for being there for him, for trying to help." Jake broke down then, the events of the morning finally catching up with him. "I should have done more," he sobbed. "I should have." "You did everything you could," Lisa assured him, her own tears falling freely now. "Mike would be so grateful. We all are." As the group waited, they shared stories about Mike, his love for the ocean, his kindness, his terrible jokes. It was a way to keep hope alive, to remind themselves of the man they were all praying would pull through. Hours passed, each minute feeling like an eternity. Nurses came and went, offering updates when they could, but the waiting room remained tense with worry and anticipation. Finally, after what seemed like an age, Dr. Chen emerged from the operating room. She looked exhausted but determined as she approached Mike's family. "Mrs. Peterson?" she asked, and Lisa stood immediately, gripping Dave's hand for support. "How is he?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is he—" Dr. Chen's face softened with compassion. "Your husband is alive," she began, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the group. "The surgery was complex and challenging, but Mike is incredibly strong. We've managed to save his leg, though there's still a long road of recovery ahead." Lisa's knees buckled, and Dave caught her, supporting her weight. "He's alive," she repeated, as if saying it would make it more real. "Oh, thank God," Dr. Chen continued, her voice gentle but honest. "I want to be clear, Mrs. Peterson. Mike's injuries were severe. The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical. We'll be monitoring him closely for any signs of infection or complications. But I want you to know, your husband showed remarkable resilience. His physical fitness and quick thinking during the attack likely saved his life." Lisa nodded, trying to absorb all the information. "When can I see him?" "He's being moved to the ICU now," Dr. Chen replied. "Once he's settled, you can go in for a short visit. But remember, He's heavily sedated and will be for some time. As the group absorbed this news, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the windows, they could see news vans and reporters gathering, all clamoring for information about the shark attack victim. Dave turned to Lisa, his expression serious. "You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. We can handle this." Lisa squared her shoulders, a steely resolve settling over her features. "No, I'll do it. They need to know that Mike's a fighter, that he's going to get through this, and they need to understand that this wasn't just some random attack. We need better shark monitoring, better warning systems. If any good can come from this, it has to start now." As Lisa prepared to face the media, inside the ICU, Mike Peterson lay still, his body battered but alive. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring his vital signs. His left leg, heavily bandaged and elevated, bore testament to the ordeal he had endured and the fight that still lay ahead. In his sedated state, Mike was oblivious to the tubes and wires surrounding him, unaware of the battle his body had just fought and won. But deep in his subconscious, the memory of those terrifying moments in the water remained, a primal fear that would shape his life in ways he had yet to understand. As night fell over Byron Bay, the community rallied around the Peterson family. Candlelight vigils were held on the beach, surfers paddled out in a circle of solidarity, and messages of support flooded in from around the world. The ocean, now calm and innocuous under the moonlight, gave no hint of the drama that had unfolded in its depths. But for those who lived and loved by its shores, the events of that day had forever changed their relationship with the sea. Mike Peterson had survived the initial attack and the critical first hours, but his fight was far from over. The journey to recovery, both physical and psychological, was just beginning. A journey that would test his strength, his relationships, and his very identity as a surfer and lover of the ocean. As the first day drew to a close, Byron Bay held its collective breath, hoping for the best but prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. The story of Mike Peterson's fight for survival had only just begun, and its impact would ripple through the community for years to come. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the churning waters off Byron Bay. The idyllic scene of moments ago had transformed into a nightmarish tableau of fear and desperation. The jet ski, piloted by lifeguard Sarah Thompson, cut through the waves at breakneck speed, its engine roaring in defiance against the vast, indifferent ocean. On the back of the jet ski, lifeguard Tom Fletcher clung to Mike Peterson's limp form, one arm wrapped tightly around the injured surfer's chest, while the other pressed a makeshift compress against the mangled remains of his left leg. Blood seeped through Tom's fingers, a stark crimson against the azure waters. "Faster, Sarah!" Tom shouted over the engine's roar and the rushing wind. "We're losing him!" Sarah gritted her teeth, her knuckles white on the handlebars as she pushed the jet ski to its limits. "I'm going as fast as I can," she yelled back, her eyes fixed on the distant shore. "How's he doing?" Tom glanced down at Mike's ashen face. The surfer's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Not good," Tom called back, his voice tight with worry. "He's lost a lot of blood. We need to get him to the paramedics now." As they raced towards the shore, Tom's mind raced even faster. He'd seen shark attacks before in his years as a lifeguard, but nothing like this. The violence of the attack, the sheer amount of damage, it was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. He found himself silently praying, something he hadn't done in years. "Stay with us, Mike," he murmured, tightening his grip on the unconscious surfer. "Your family's waiting for you. You can't give up now." Behind them, two other surfers, Jake and his friend, paddled frantically towards the beach. Jake's face was a mask of terror and guilt, his eyes continually darting back to the jet ski, carrying Mike. "Come on, mate," Jake's friend Chris urged. "We've got to get to shore. There's nothing more we can do for him now." Jake nodded numbly, his arms moving mechanically as he paddled. The image of Mike's body being torn by the shark replayed in his mind on a horrifying loop. "I should have done more," he muttered. "I should have—" "You did everything you could," Chris insisted, his own voice shaky. "Now we need to get ourselves safe." That shark could still be out there. As if summoned by Chris's words, a dark shape cut through the water not far from them. Both surfers froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. "Oh God," Jake whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "It's coming back." On the jet ski, Sarah had also spotted the shark. "Tom!" she shouted. 3 o'clock. The shark's following us." Tom twisted around, his blood running cold as he saw the telltale dorsal fin slicing through the water. The shark, drawn by the scent of blood, was indeed pursuing them, closing the distance with terrifying speed. "Go, go, go," Tom yelled, his voice cracking with urgency. "It's coming straight for us." Sarah gunned the engine, the jet ski leaping forward with a surge of power. The sudden acceleration nearly threw Tom and Mike off the back, but Tom managed to maintain his grip, his arm like an iron band around Mike's chest. The race to the shore became even more frantic. Sarah weaved the jet ski in an erratic pattern, trying to throw off the pursuing predator. Tom kept his eyes fixed on the shark, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. "We're not going to make it," he thought, a cold dread settling in his stomach. But he pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on keeping pressure on Mike's wound and holding him secure. On the beach, a crowd had gathered, held back by a hastily erected police cordon. Murmurs of shock and prayers rippled through the onlookers as they watched the jet ski's desperate approach. Among the crowd, Lisa Peterson pushed her way to the front, her face a mask of terror and hope. She had arrived at the beach just minutes ago, alerted by a neighbor who had heard the commotion. "Mike!" she screamed, straining against the police tape. "Oh God, Mike!" A police officer gently but firmly held her back. "Ma'am, please," he said, his voice sympathetic but firm. "You need to let the paramedics do their job. They'll bring him to you as soon as they can." Lisa sagged against the officer, her eyes never leaving the approaching jet ski. "Please," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Please let him be okay." The jet ski was now less than 100 meters from shore, but the shark was gaining on them. Tom could see its massive form just beneath the surface, a dark shadow of death pursuing them with single-minded determination. "Sarah!" Tom shouted. "It's right behind us." Sarah didn't respond, her entire being focused on guiding the jet ski through the waves. They were so close to the shore now, so close to safety. Suddenly, the shark surged forward, its enormous body breaching the surface in a spray of foam and fury. Tom felt a moment of pure primal terror as he stared into the black, lifeless eyes of the predator, its rows of serrated teeth gleaming in the sunlight. In that split second, Tom made a decision. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, he heaved Mike's body over his shoulder and leaped from the jet ski, just as the shark's jaws snapped shut where they had been moments before. The impact with the water drove the air from Tom's lungs. He struggled to the surface, still clutching Mike's limp form. They were in the shallows now, the water only chest deep. "Help!" Tom bellowed, staggering towards the shore. "I need help here!" The crowd on the beach erupted into action. Paramedics rushed into the water, followed closely by several police officers and brave bystanders. They reached Tom and Mike just as Tom's strength gave out, his legs buckling beneath him. "I've got him," a paramedic said, taking Mike from Tom's arms. "You did good, mate. We've got it from here." As Mike was rushed up the beach to the waiting ambulance, Tom collapsed onto the sand, his body shaking with exhaustion and fading adrenaline. Sarah had beached the jet ski nearby and ran to his side. "Tom!" she cried, dropping to her knees beside him. "Are you okay? Did it get you?" Tom shook his head, still gasping for breath. "No," he managed. "No, we made it." "But God, Sarah." It was so close. Sarah helped Tom to his feet, supporting him as they made their way up the beach. The crowd parted before them, many reaching out to pat Tom on the back or murmur words of praise and thanks. At the ambulance, a flurry of activity surrounded Mike. Paramedics worked feverishly, attaching IV lines and monitoring equipment. Lisa Peterson stood nearby, her face streaked with tears as she watched the fight to save her husband's life. "BP's critically low," one paramedic called out. "We need to move now." As they prepared to load Mike into the ambulance, Lisa caught sight of Tom and Sarah approaching. She rushed over to them, embracing Tom fiercely. "Thank you," she sobbed, her words muffled against Tom's chest. "Thank you for saving him." Tom returned the embrace awkwardly, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "He's a fighter, Mrs. Peterson," he said softly. Don't give up on him." The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the vehicle sped away, its sirens wailing. As it disappeared from view, a hush fell over the beach. The idyllic morning had turned into a nightmare, a stark reminder of the wild and unpredictable nature of the ocean they all loved. In the aftermath of the rescue, the beach burst into activity once more. Police were taking statements from witnesses, news crews were arriving to cover the story, and curious onlookers were being ushered away from the scene. Jake and Chris had made it safely to shore and were being checked over by paramedics. Jake's face was a mask of shock and guilt as he recounted the attack to a police officer. "I should have done more," he kept saying, his voice hollow. "I could have." The officer placed a comforting hand on Jake's shoulder. "You did everything you could, son. You helped keep him afloat until the lifeguards arrived. You're a hero." But Jake shook his head, unconvinced. The weight of what he'd witnessed would stay with him for a long time to come. As the chaos on the beach continued, Dr. Emma Chen, the marine biologist who had been conducting research earlier that morning, approached Tom and Sarah. Her face was grave as she spoke to them. "I saw the whole thing from shore," she said. "The shark, it was a bull shark, wasn't it? And a large one at that." Tom nodded, running a hand through his salt-encrusted hair. "Yeah, looked like it. Maybe 3 meters, possibly more." Emma's brow furrowed in concern. "That's unusual for this time of year. We need to understand why it came so close to shore. This attack, it could have implications for the whole ecosystem." As they discussed the incident, a commotion near the police line caught their attention. A group of angry locals had gathered, their voices raised in fury. "We need to do something about these sharks," one man shouted. "How many more people have to get hurt before we take action?" "Yeah," another voice chimed in. "We should hunt it down. Kill it before it attacks someone else." Sarah stepped forward, her voice cutting through the angry murmurs. "That's not the answer," she said firmly. "Killing sharks isn't going to solve anything. We need better monitoring systems, more research. We need to understand why this happened, not react out of fear." Her words seemed to calm the crowd somewhat, but the tension in the air remained palpable. The attack had shaken the community to its core, and the repercussions would be felt for a long time to come. As the morning wore on, the beach slowly emptied of onlookers and emergency personnel. But the memory of what had transpired lingered, as tangible as the salt in the air and the sound of the waves. Tom and Sarah stood at the water's edge, looking out over the ocean that had been their workplace and playground for so long. The water sparkled innocently in the sunlight, giving no hint of the drama that had unfolded in its depths. "Do you think he'll make it?" Sarah asked quietly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Tom was silent for a long moment before responding. "I hope so," he said finally. "But even if he does, nothing's going to be the same after this. Not for him, not for us, not for this town." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The events of that morning had changed everything. Their relationship with the ocean, the delicate balance between human recreation and wild nature, the very fabric of their coastal community. All of it had been irrevocably altered in the space of a few terrifying minutes. As they turned to leave the beach, both lifeguards knew that their work was far from over. There would be incident reports to file, questions to answer, and a community to help heal. But for now, all they could do was hope. Hope for Mike's recovery, hope for understanding in the face of fear, and hope for a future where humans and nature could coexist in harmony. The sun continued its journey across the sky, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded beneath it. And the ocean, vast and inscrutable, kept its secrets, the great bull shark disappearing once more into its depths. The day's events would leave an indelible mark on Byron Bay, a reminder of both the perils and the indomitable spirit of those who lived their lives by the sea. The emergency room of Byron Bay Hospital was a whirlwind of controlled chaos as the doors burst open, admitting the gurney carrying Mike Peterson. The acrid smell of antiseptic mixed with the metallic tang of blood as doctors and nurses swarmed around the injured surfer. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead trauma surgeon, barked orders as she assessed Mike's condition. "Get me a full set of vitals. I need 2 large-bore IVs and start pushing O negative. Where's that portable ultrasound?" Nurses and residents moved with practiced efficiency, their hands steady despite the urgency of the situation. Mike lay unconscious, his skin ashen beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. His left leg, or what remained of it, was a mangled mess of torn flesh and exposed bone. Dr. Chen's eyes narrowed as she examined the wound. Prep or one stat. We need to get him into surgery now if we have any hope of saving this leg. As the team worked to stabilize Mike for surgery, Dr. Chen turned to the young resident at her side. Dr. Patel, what's our primary concern right now? Doctor. Patel swallowed hard, his eyes wide as he took in the extent of Mike's injuries. Blood loss and shock, doctor? Correct. Dr. Chen nodded. And after that? Infection, Dr. Patel replied, more confidently this time. Shark bites are notorious for introducing harmful bacteria. Exactly, Dr. Chen confirmed. Let's start him on broad-spectrum antibiotics immediately. We can't afford to take any chances. As they prepared to move Mike to the operating room, a commotion outside caught their attention. Lisa Peterson had arrived, her face a mask of fear and desperation as she tried to push past the security guard. "That's my husband," she cried, her voice breaking. "Please, I need to see him." Dr. Chen quickly made her way to Lisa, her voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm Dr. Chen. I'm going to be operating on your husband. I promise you we're doing everything we can, but right now the best thing you can do is let us work." Lisa's eyes, brimming with tears, locked onto Dr. Chen's. Is he going to make it?" Dr. Chen took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Your husband's injuries are severe, but he's strong. We're going to do everything in our power to save him and his leg. I'll update you as soon as we know more." Lisa nodded numbly, allowing herself to be guided to the waiting area by a sympathetic nurse. As she sank into a chair, the full weight of the situation crashed down upon her. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Meanwhile, in the operating room, Dr. Chen and her team worked tirelessly to save Mike's leg and his life. The damage was extensive. Torn muscles, shattered bones, and severed blood vessels all demanded immediate attention. "More suction here," Dr. Chen called out, her forehead beaded with sweat beneath her surgical cap. "I need to see what I'm doing if we're going to salvage these blood vessels." Hours ticked by, each minute a battle against time and the devastating force of nature that had been unleashed on Mike's body. Outside in the waiting room, Lisa was joined by a growing group of friends and community members, all anxiously awaiting news. Dave, Mike's longtime surfing buddy, paced back and forth, unable to sit still. "This is insane," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Mike's the most experienced surfer I know. How could this happen?" Jake, the young surfer who had been with Mike during the attack, sat in the corner, his face pale and drawn. "It's my fault," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have done more. I should have." Lisa, roused from her own grief by Jake's words, moved to sit beside him. She took his hand in hers, her voice gentle but firm. "Jake, listen to me. This is not your fault. You did everything you could. Mike would be the first to tell you that." Jake looked up at her, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "But if I had been faster, if I had—" "No," Lisa interrupted, squeezing his hand. "We can't think like that. The only one to blame here is that shark, and even then—" She trailed off, her gaze distant. "We all know the risks when we enter the ocean. It's wild. It's unpredictable. That's why Mike loves it so much." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Emma Chen, the marine biologist who had witnessed the attack from the shore. She approached Lisa hesitantly, her face etched with concern. "Mrs. Peterson? I'm Dr. Chen, Emma Chen. I saw what happened this morning. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do to help." Lisa looked up at Emma, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "You're the shark expert, aren't you? I've seen you on the local news." Emma nodded, taking a seat across from Lisa. "Yes, that's right. I study the local shark populations. Mrs. Peterson, I want you to know that what happened today, it's incredibly rare. Bull sharks don't typically behave this way, especially not in these waters." Dave, overhearing the conversation, joined them, his voice tight with barely contained anger. Rare or not, it happened. What are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? We need to hunt that thing down before it attacks someone else. Emma shook her head emphatically. That's not the answer. Killing sharks isn't going to solve anything. We need to understand why this happened. Was there something that drew the shark closer to shore? Has there been a shift in the local ecosystem? These are the questions we need to be asking. As the group debated, the doors to the operating room finally swung open. Dr. Sarah Chen emerged, looking exhausted but determined. The waiting room fell silent as she approached Lisa. "Mrs. Peterson," Dr. Chen began, her voice gentle. "Your husband is out of surgery. It was touch and go for a while, but he's stable now." Lisa stood, her legs shaky. "And his leg? Were you able to?" Dr. Chen nodded. "We managed to save the leg, but the damage was extensive. He's going to need multiple surgeries and a long period of rehabilitation. But Mrs. Peterson, the important thing is that he's alive. Your husband is incredibly strong." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Lisa sagged against Dave, overcome with emotion. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He's in recovery now," Dr. Chen explained. "Once we move him to the ICU, you can visit him briefly. But I want to prepare you, he's heavily sedated and there's a lot of equipment. It might be a shock." As the group absorbed this news, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the windows, they could see news vans arriving, reporters and camera crews setting up in the parking lot. Dave turned to Lisa, his expression serious. "You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. We can handle this." But Lisa squared her shoulders, a steely resolve settling over her features. "No, I'll do it. They need to know that Mike's a fighter, that he's going to get through this. And they need to understand that this wasn't just some random attack. We need better shark monitoring, better warning systems. If any good can come from this, it has to start now." As Lisa prepared to face the media, Emma stepped forward. "If you'd like, I can join you. I can provide some context about shark behavior, try to calm some of the fears that are sure to be circulating." Lisa nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I think that would be helpful." Together, Lisa and Emma made their way outside, where they were immediately surrounded by a sea of microphones and cameras. Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "My husband, Mike Peterson, was attacked by a shark this morning while surfing at Byron Bay," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion roiling beneath the surface. "Thanks to the quick action of the lifeguards and the incredible medical team here at the hospital, Mike is alive and fighting." As Lisa spoke, painting a picture of Mike's strength and their family's determination to overcome this tragedy, Emma provided scientific context, emphasizing the rarity of such attacks and the importance of coexistence with marine life. Back inside the hospital, Jake watched the impromptu press conference on a small TV in the corner of the waiting room. He marveled at Lisa's composure, at her ability to think of the bigger picture even in the midst of personal tragedy. Dave noticed Jake's expression and sat down beside him. "Lisa's something else, isn't she?" he said softly. Jake nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Dave placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Listen, mate, what you did out there today, staying with Mike, helping to keep him afloat, that was brave. You're a hero whether you feel like one or not." Jake shook his head, his voice barely audible. "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I failed him." "Failed him?" Dave echoed, his brow furrowing. "Jake, you did everything you could. Sometimes the ocean reminds us how small we are, how powerless we can be in the face of nature. But what matters is that we don't let that fear control us. Mike wouldn't want that." As they talked, a nurse approached, informing them that Mike had been moved to the ICU and that Lisa could see him now. Dave stood, giving Jake's shoulder a final squeeze. "Come on," he said. "Let's go see our friend." In the ICU, Mike lay still, surrounded by a network of tubes and wires. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided a rhythmic backdrop to the hiss of the ventilator. Lisa approached the bed slowly, her hand covering her mouth as she took in the sight of her strong, vibrant husband looking so vulnerable. "Oh, Mike," she whispered, gently taking his hand in hers. "You've got to fight, love. We're all here, waiting for you to wake up." As Lisa spoke softly to Mike, updating him on Lily's upcoming surf competition, and promising him that they'd face whatever came next together. The sun began to set outside the hospital windows. The first day was drawing to a close, but the journey of recovery, for Mike, for his family, and for the entire community of Byron Bay, was just beginning. The attack had shaken their world, challenging their relationship with the ocean and forcing them to confront the delicate balance between human activity and wild nature. But as the community rallied around the Petersons, there was a sense that from this tragedy, something positive might emerge: a greater understanding, a renewed respect for the ocean, and a commitment to coexistence with the creatures that call it home. As night fell over Byron Bay, the town held its collective breath, hoping for the best but prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. The story of Mike Peterson's fight for survival had only just begun, and its impact would ripple through the community for years to come. The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting a golden glow across Byron Bay. The beach, usually bustling with surfers and early morning joggers, was eerily quiet. Yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze, cordoning off a large section of the shoreline where just yesterday, Mike Peterson's life had changed forever. Detective Sarah Lawson ducked under the tape, her keen eyes scanning the sand for any evidence that might have been overlooked in the chaos of the previous day. Despite the gravity of the situation, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of awe at the beauty of the sunrise reflecting off the ocean. "Quite a view, isn't it?" a voice behind her said, as if reading her thoughts. Sarah turned to see Dr. Emma Chen, the marine biologist who had been present during yesterday's attack. "Dr. Chen?" Sarah nodded in greeting. "I didn't expect to see you here so early." Emma shrugged, her eyes scanning the water. "Couldn't sleep? Figured I might as well make myself useful." Sarah understood the feeling. She'd tossed and turned all night, her mind replaying the details of the case. "Well, I'm glad you're here. Your expertise could be invaluable. What can you tell me about shark behavior that might explain yesterday's attack?" Emma took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. Bull sharks are known to be aggressive, but attacks like this are still incredibly rare. They're not typically found this close to shore unless there's a specific attractant. "Attractant?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of attractant?" "Could be a number of things," Emma explained. "Changes in water temperature, unusual prey movements, or even human activity. We'll need to conduct a thorough environmental survey to get a clearer picture." As they talked, a small group of local surfers approached the police line. Their faces were a mix of anger and fear. "Hey!" one of them called out. "When are you going to do something about this shark problem? We can't even go in the water now." Sarah held up a hand, her voice calm but authoritative. "We understand your concerns, sir. We're conducting a full investigation to ensure the safety of everyone in Byron Bay." Emma stepped forward, addressing the group. "I know you're all scared and angry, but it's important to remember that sharks are a vital part of our ecosystem. This attack, while tragic, is extremely rare." The surfers didn't look convinced. One of them, a weathered man in his 50s, spoke up. "Rare or not, it happened. What's to stop it from happening again? We need to hunt that thing down before it kills someone." Emma shook her head emphatically. "That's not the answer. Killing sharks won't solve anything. We need to understand why this happened and find ways to coexist safely." The tension was palpable, but before the argument could escalate further, Sarah's phone buzzed. She stepped away to answer it, returning a moment later with a grim expression. "That was the hospital," she said to Emma. "Mike Peterson is awake. They've cleared him for questioning." Emma nodded, her face serious. "I'd like to come with you if that's all right." His account of the attack could provide crucial information. Sarah agreed, and they made their way to the hospital, leaving behind a beach community grappling with fear and uncertainty. At Byron Bay Hospital, the ICU was a hub of quiet activity. Nurses moved efficiently between rooms, checking vitals and adjusting medications. Outside Mike Peterson's room, his wife Lisa sat slumped in a chair, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless night. She looked up as Sarah and Emma approached, straightening in her seat. "Detective Lawson?" she greeted them, her voice hoarse. "And Dr. Chen. I remember you from yesterday." Sarah smiled gently. "Mrs. Peterson, how is your husband doing?" Lisa ran a hand through her disheveled hair. He's awake. In pain, but the doctors say that's to be expected. He's been asking about what happened, about the other surfers who were out there. Emma stepped forward, her voice soft. That's actually why we're here, Mrs. Peterson. We were hoping to speak with Mike about the attack. His account could be crucial in understanding what happened and preventing future incidents. Lisa nodded slowly. I understand. Just please be gentle with him, he's been through so much. Of course, Sarah assured her. We'll keep it brief. They entered the room quietly. Mike lay propped up in the hospital bed, his face pale but alert. His left leg, heavily bandaged and elevated, was a stark reminder of the ordeal he'd endured. Despite his condition, he managed a weak smile as they entered. Ah, the cavalry's arrived, he said, his voice raspy. Come to solve the mystery of the killer shark? Sarah introduced herself and Emma, explaining the purpose of their visit. Mike nodded, his expression growing serious. I'll tell you everything I can remember, he said. But I have to warn you, it's all a bit of a blur. Over the next hour, Mike recounted the events of the previous morning. He described the perfect surfing conditions, the sudden appearance of the shark, and the terrifying moments of the attack. As he spoke, Emma jotted down notes, her brow furrowed in concentration. And you're certain it was a bull shark? Emma asked when Mike had finished. Mike nodded grimly. I've been surfing these waters for decades, Dr. Chen. I know a bull shark when I see one. This one was massive, easily over 3 meters. Emma exchanged a glance with Sarah. That's unusually large for a bull shark in these waters. And you said you didn't notice anything unusual before the attack? No sudden changes in water temperature? No schools of fish acting strangely? Mike shook his head. Nothing out of the ordinary. 1 minute I was paddling back to shore, the next... He trailed off, his eyes distant. Sarah stepped in, her voice gentle. You're doing great, Mr. Peterson. Just one more question. Had you noticed any increased shark activity in the area recently? Or heard any reports from other surfers? Mike thought for a moment. Now that you mention it, there had been some chatter among the local fishing community. A few of the guys had mentioned seeing larger predators closer to shore than usual. But you know how fishermen's tales can be? I didn't think much of it at the time. Sarah nodded, making a note to follow up with the local fishermen. As they prepared to leave, Mike called out, his voice suddenly urgent. Detective Lawson, Dr. Chen, I need to know. Is it safe for people to go back in the water? My daughter Lily, she has a surfing competition next month. I can't bear the thought of her being in danger, but I also don't want her to give up something she loves because of what happened to me. The question hung heavy in the air. Emma stepped forward, her voice careful but firm. Mr. Peterson, I can't promise that the ocean will ever be completely safe. But I can promise you this. We will do everything in our power to understand what happened and implement measures to reduce the risk of it happening again. Mike nodded, seeming to accept this. As Sarah and Emma left the room, they could hear Lisa's soft voice comforting her husband. Outside the hospital, Sarah turned to Emma. What do you make of all this, Dr. Chen? Is this just a freak occurrence? Or is there something more going on here? Emma's face was grave. I'm not sure yet. The size of the shark Mike described, combined with its unusual behavior, it's concerning. We need to conduct a thorough survey of the area. Water temperature readings, prey movement patterns, the works. Sarah nodded. I'll get my team on it right away. In the meantime, I need to talk to the local fishing community. If there has been an increase in large predator sightings, I want to know about it. As they parted ways, both women felt the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. This wasn't just about solving a case or conducting research. The safety of an entire community hung in the balance. Over the next few days, Byron Bay became a hive of activity. Marine biologists from universities across Australia descended on the small coastal town, setting up monitoring equipment and conducting surveys. Local fishermen were interviewed, their logs and catch reports scrutinized for any signs of unusual activity. On the beach, a team of volunteers led by Emma worked tirelessly, taking water samples and tracking fish movements. Among them was Jake, the young surfer who had been with Mike during the attack. He had thrown himself into the research effort, desperate to make amends for what he saw as his failure to protect Mike. Jake, Emma called out, noticing the young man's exhausted appearance. Why don't you take a break? You've been at this for hours. Jake shook his head stubbornly. I'm fine, Dr. Chen. I want to help. I need to help. Emma approached him, her voice gentle but firm. Jake, listen to me. What happened to Mike wasn't your fault. You did everything you could. But if you really want to help, you need to take care of yourself too. Jake's shoulders slumped, the facade of determination crumbling. I keep seeing it happen, over and over in my head. If I had been faster, if I had noticed the shark sooner. Emma placed a hand on his shoulder. That's trauma, Jake. It's normal to feel this way after what you've been through. But beating yourself up won't change what happened. What will help is channeling that energy into something positive, like what we're doing here. But you can't do that if you run yourself into the ground. Jake nodded slowly, finally allowing himself to be led away from the research site. As they walked along the beach, Emma pointed out the various monitoring stations they had set up. See those buoys out there? She said. They're recording water temperature, salinity, and a host of other factors. And those underwater cameras? They're helping us track fish movements and any shark activity in the area. Jake looked out at the ocean, his expression a mix of fear and longing. Do you think it'll ever be safe to go back in? He asked quietly. Emma sighed. Jake, the ocean is never completely safe. It's wild, unpredictable. That's part of what makes it so beautiful and so dangerous. But with the right precautions, with a better understanding of shark behavior and movement patterns, we can make it safer. As they talked, Detective Lawson approached, her face serious. Dr. Chen, we need to talk. I've just finished interviewing the local fishing community. You're going to want to hear this. Emma excused herself, following Sarah to a quiet spot away from the volunteers. What did you find out? She asked. Sarah pulled out her notebook. Over the past month, there's been a significant increase in sightings of large sharks close to shore. Not just bull sharks, but great whites and tiger sharks too. And get this, several fishermen reported catching fish with unusual bite marks, larger than anything they've seen before. Emma's brow furrowed. That's concerning. It could indicate a shift in the local marine ecosystem. But what could be causing it? Before Sarah could respond, they were interrupted by a shout from one of the research assistants. Dr. Chen, you need to see this. They rushed over to where a small crowd had gathered around a computer screen. On it, footage from one of the underwater cameras played. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the image. Is that? Sarah began. Emma nodded, her face pale. A bull shark, and it's even larger than the one Mike described. This is unprecedented. The footage showed a massive bull shark, easily over 4 meters in length, cruising through the waters just off Byron Bay. Its size was shocking, but what really caught Emma's attention was its behavior. The shark moved with purpose, seeming to patrol a specific area. This isn't normal behavior, Emma muttered, more to herself than to the others. It's almost like it's guarding something. Sarah turned to Emma, her voice tense. Dr. Chen, what are we dealing with here? Is this the same shark that attacked Mike? Emma shook her head slowly, her eyes still fixed on the screen. I don't think so. This one is even larger, which means there's more than one abnormally large, abnormally aggressive shark in these waters. Sarah finished grimly. The implications of this discovery sent a ripple of unease through the group. Jake, who had been watching from the edge of the crowd, spoke up. So what do we do now? He asked, his voice shaky. How do we keep people safe? Emma turned to address the group, her voice firm despite the worry evident in her eyes. We continue our research. We need to understand why these sharks are behaving this way, why they're so much larger than normal. And in the meantime, we need to implement stricter safety measures. Sarah nodded in agreement. I'll speak with the local council about extending the beach closure. We may need to consider installing shark nets, at least temporarily. As the group dispersed to continue their work with renewed urgency, Emma found herself staring out at the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. It was a beautiful sight, a stark contrast to the tension and fear that now permeated the community. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Jake, his young face etched with worry. Dr. Chen, he said softly, do you think we'll ever understand why this is happening? Emma sighed, choosing her words carefully. Science is about asking questions, Jake. Sometimes we find answers quickly, sometimes it takes years. But we keep asking, keep searching. That's how we make progress. Jake nodded, seeming to draw some comfort from her words. As they stood there, watching the sun sink below the horizon, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something big. Whatever was causing these changes in shark behavior, whatever had led to the attack on Mike Peterson, it was more than just a localized anomaly. It was a mystery that needed solving, not just for the sake of Byron Bay, but for the broader understanding of marine ecosystems and the delicate balance between humans and nature. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, Emma steeled herself for the challenges ahead. The investigation was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The early morning light filtered through the curtains of Mike Peterson's hospital room, casting a soft glow on the sterile surroundings. Mike lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. It had been 3 weeks since the shark attack that had nearly claimed his life, and today marked a significant milestone, his first physical therapy session. A gentle knock on the door pulled Mike from his reverie. "Come in," he called, his voice stronger now than it had been in the days immediately following the attack. Lisa entered, her face a mixture of concern and forced cheerfulness. "Good morning, love," she said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Ready for the big day?" Mike attempted a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose." Lisa sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand in hers. "Mike, I know you're scared, but Dr. Ramirez says you're making excellent progress. This is a good thing." Mike nodded, squeezing her hand. I know, it's just... Lisa, what if I can't do it? What if I can't walk again, let alone surf?" The fear in his voice was palpable, and Lisa felt her heart constrict. This was the Mike that only she got to see. Vulnerable, uncertain, so different from the confident surfer the rest of the world knew. "Then we'll face that together," she said firmly. "But let's not get ahead of ourselves. One step at a time, remember?" Before Mike could respond, there was another knock at the door. Dr. Elena Ramirez, the physical therapist, entered with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson," she said brightly. "Are we ready to get started?" Mike took a deep breath, steeling himself. "As ready as I'll ever be, Doc." Dr. Ramirez approached the bed, her experienced eyes assessing Mike's condition. "All right, let's start by sitting you up. Mrs. Peterson, would you mind giving us a hand?" Together they helped Mike into a sitting position, his legs dangling over the side of the bed. Mike winced as the movement sent a jolt of pain through his injured leg. "Easy does it," Dr. Ramirez soothed. "Now, I want you to try and put some weight on your good leg. We're just going to stand for a moment, okay?" Mike nodded, his jaw set with determination. With Lisa on one side and Dr. Ramirez on the other, he slowly pushed himself to a standing position. For a brief moment, he felt a surge of triumph, and then his legs buckled. "Whoa there," Dr. Ramirez exclaimed, catching him before he could fall. "That's okay, that's normal, let's try again." For the next hour, Mike struggled through a series of exercises designed to rebuild his strength and mobility. By the end, he was drenched in sweat and trembling with exhaustion. "You did great, Mr. Peterson, Doctor," Ramirez said encouragingly as they helped him back into bed. "Remember, recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. We'll do a little more each day." As Dr. Ramirez left, Lisa could see the frustration etched on Mike's face. "Hey," she said softly. "You heard the doctor. You did great." Mike turned away, his voice bitter. "Great? Lisa, I could barely stand. How am I supposed to walk, let alone get back on a surfboard?" Lisa sat beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "Mike, look at me." When he finally met her gaze, she continued. 3 weeks ago, we didn't know if you'd survive. Now you're sitting up. You're starting therapy, that's not nothing." Mike's eyes softened, a hint of his old self shining through. "You're right as usual," he said with a small smile. I feel so helpless, Lisa. Surfing has been my whole life. Who am I without it?" Lisa took his hand, her voice filled with emotion. "You're Mike Peterson. You're my husband, Lily's father. You're strong, you're brave, and you're a survivor. Surfing is part of you, yes, but it's not all of you." As they sat together, drawing strength from each other's presence, There was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices could be heard, growing louder by the second. "I don't care about your rules. He saved my life. I have a right to see him." Mike and Lisa exchanged surprised glances. "Is that?" Lisa began. The door burst open, revealing Jake, the young surfer who had been with Mike during the attack. He looked wild-eyed and disheveled, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Jake?" Mike said, shock evident in his voice. "What are you doing here?" Jake stumbled forward, his eyes wide and brimming with unshed tears. "Mr. Peterson, I had to see you. I had to apologize. I'm so sorry. I should have done more. I should have—" "Whoa. Whoa," Mike interrupted, holding up a hand. "Jake, slow down. What are you talking about?" Jake collapsed into a chair, his body shaking with suppressed sobs. "The attack. I was right there. I should have seen the shark coming. I should have warned you sooner. If I had been faster, maybe you wouldn't be—" "Stop right there," Mike said firmly. "Jake, look at me." When the young surfer finally met his gaze, Mike continued, "You have nothing to apologize for. You did everything you could. If it wasn't for you, I might not be here at all." Jake shook his head vehemently. "But your leg, your surfing career, is not your fault," Mike finished. "Jake, the ocean is unpredictable. We all know the risks when we paddle out. What happened to me was a freak accident, nothing more." As Jake absorbed these words, Lisa quietly excused herself, sensing that the two surfers needed some time alone. She found a nurse in the hallway and explained the situation, ensuring that Jake wouldn't be thrown out. Back in the room, Mike was speaking softly to Jake. "I heard you've been helping Dr. Chen with her research." "That's good, Jake. That's how we make a difference." Jake nodded, wiping his eyes. "Yeah, I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit around, you know?" Mike smiled, a hint of his old mentor self shining through. "I understand. But Jake, you can't let what happened consume you. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Don't let fear keep you out of the water." Jake looked up, surprise evident on his face. You think I should keep surfing?" "I think you should do what you love," Mike replied. "The ocean. It's not our enemy, Jake. What happened to me was terrible, yes, but it doesn't change the beauty and power of the sea. We just need to respect it, understand it better." As they continued to talk, Mike felt a weight lifting from his chest. He had been so focused on his own recovery, his own fears, that he hadn't considered the impact the attack had had on others. Helping Jake, mentoring him through this, gave Mike a sense of purpose he had been missing. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Emma Chen and Detective Sarah Lawson. They looked surprised to see Jake there, but quickly composed themselves. "Mr. Peterson," Dr. Chen began, "we hope we're not interrupting, but we have some news we thought you should hear." Mike straightened up, suddenly alert. "What kind of news?" Detective Lawson stepped forward. "We've completed our initial investigation into the attack, Mr. Peterson. And, well, it's not what we expected." Over the next hour, Emma and Sarah explained their findings. The unusually large sharks, the changes in behavioral patterns, the potential environmental factors at play. Mike and Jake listened intently, their faces a mixture of fascination and concern. "So what you're saying," Mike said slowly, "is that this wasn't just a random attack? That there's something bigger going on?" Emma nodded, her face grave. "It appears so. We're still piecing together all the data, but it seems clear that there have been significant changes in the local marine ecosystem, changes that are affecting shark behavior in ways we don't yet fully understand." Jake leaned forward, his earlier distress replaced by intense curiosity. "But what's causing these changes, and what can we do about it?" Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've got theories, everything from climate change affecting water temperatures to illegal dumping altering the chemical composition of the water. But we need more data, more time to really understand what's happening." Mike was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then, to everyone's surprise, he began to chuckle. "Mr. Peterson?" Emma asked, concerned. "Are you all right?" Mike nodded, a wry smile on his face. "Yeah, I'm all right. It's just, All this time I've been lying here feeling sorry for myself, wondering if I'd ever surf again. And now I find out that what happened to me might be part of something much bigger, something that could affect the whole ocean. He turned to Jake, his eyes alight with a newfound determination. You hear that, kid? Looks like we've got work to do. Jake blinked, confused. We do? Mike nodded. You bet we do. Dr. Chen, Detective Lawson, I want to help. I may not be able to get in the water right now, but I've been surfing these waters for decades. I know them better than anyone. If there's anything I can do to help your investigation, just say the word. Emma and Sarah exchanged surprised glances. Mr. Peterson, Emma said carefully, we'd be grateful for any insights you could provide, but are you sure? You're still recovering. I'm sure, Mike said firmly. This is bigger than me, bigger than my injury. If what happened to me can help prevent future attacks, help us understand what's happening to our oceans, well then maybe it all means something. As the group continued to discuss the investigation, Lisa returned to the room. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene before her. Mike was sitting up straighter than she'd seen in weeks, his face animated as he talked with Jake and the others. For the first time since the attack, she saw a spark of the old Mike, passionate, engaged, full of life. Full. She felt tears prick her eyes, but for once they were tears of relief and hope rather than fear and sorrow. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but in that moment, Lisa knew that they would get through it. Together, as a family, and as part of a community united in its love for the ocean and determination to protect it. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm light over Byron Bay, the hospital room buzzed with energy and purpose. Plans were made, theories discussed, and a sense of cautious optimism began to take root. Mike Peterson's journey of recovery was far from over. There would be more grueling physical therapy sessions, more moments of frustration and doubt. But now he had something he'd been missing, a sense of purpose, a way to turn his tragedy into something meaningful. As the meeting wrapped up and people began to leave, Mike caught Lisa's eye. She saw the change in him immediately and moved to his side, taking his hand. You okay? She asked softly. Mike nodded, squeezing her hand. Yeah, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. For the first time in weeks, I think I really am. As they sat together, looking out the window at the ocean that had nearly claimed Mike's life, there was a sense of a new chapter beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, but they would face it together, not just as a family, but as part of a community united in its quest for understanding and coexistence with the powerful, unpredictable, and ultimately awe-inspiring world beneath the waves. The story of Mike Peterson's shark attack was not over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now it was no longer just a tale of survival. It was a catalyst for change, a rallying cry for a community, and the start of a journey that would take them into the depths of marine science and conservation. As the day wore on and the hospital settled into its routine, Mike found himself looking forward to the future for the first time since the attack. He knew the path ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it head-on. With Lisa by his side, Lily to inspire him, and a community rallying behind him, Mike Peterson was ready to dive back into life, even if, for now, that life was on dry land. The ocean, visible from his window, sparkled in the afternoon sun. It was beautiful, dangerous, and mysterious, much like life itself, and Mike was determined to embrace it all, one day at a time.